Hello everyone, today's lesson we will talk about narrative text. The purpose of learning narrative text is first to know the definition of narrative text, to know the purpose of narrative text, to know the types of narrative text, to identify the linguistic elements of narrative text, to identify the structure of narrative text, to practice reading narrative text with correct pronunciation and intonation, and to determine the moral value of the narrative text. Do you know what is meant by narrative text? So, narrative text is a text that contains imaginary stories or true stories that have been exaggerated. Usually, there is a moral value to be learned at the end of the story. Because this is a fictional story, the main purpose of narrative text is to entertain the readers with the story and also the moral values contained in the story. There are several types of narrative text. However, it seems that you are quite familiar. The reason is there are several types of narrative text that we have often heard from an early age. The examples of narrative text can be fable, legend, myth, fairy tale, mystery, romance, short story, comic, and others. Do you know guys about fable? Fable is story about the world of animals and plants that can talk and act like people. The example of fable is the story of the mouse, deer, and the crocodile, the story of elephant and the ant, the arrogant squirrel, the story of the rabbit and the turtle, and others. And the next is fairy tale. Fairy tale is a story that didn't really happen and was written especially for children. The example of fairy tale is Bawang Putih and Bawang Merah, Peter Pan, Golden Cucumber, Snow White, Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, Beauty and the Beast, Sleeping Beauty, and others. And the next is legend. Legend is a folk tale in ancient times that relates to historical events regarding the origin of a place that is seasoned with magic, as well as the features of its characters. And the example of legend is The Legend of Danau Toba, Roro Mendut and Joko Tingkir, The Legend of Roro Jonggrang, Gunung Tangkuban Perahu, Malin Kundang, and others. And the next is myth. Myth is a folktale whose characters are gods or goddesses or demigods that occur in another world or the past and are considered to have really happened by the adherents of the story. Myths describe the great things that happen to people and the choices they make. The example of the myth is the myth of Dewi Sri. There are generally narrative text structures, namely as follows. The first, orientation. This part is at the beginning of the story, which contains the introduction of characters, places, and times. And the next, complication. This part is in the middle of the story, which raises a problem and is followed by other problems. Then, resolution. This part contains solution to problems. And the last, reorientation. This part is at the end of the story, which contains a conclusion and a moral value. Let's take a look how it applies to the following example of narrative text. As we can see, there are four generic structures, namely orientation, complication, resolution, and reorientation. Reorientation is optional in narrative text. Next is language features of narrative text. The first, using past tense. For example, one day, a cat and a fox were having a conversation. The word were indicates past tense. Second, using adjectives. For example, clever, conceited, etc. Third, using adverb. For example, one day, once upon a time, etc. And fourth, using linking words pertaining to time. For example, then, however, etc. 5. Using action verbs or material processes. For example, posted, climbed, etc. 6. Use direct expressions. For example, why, I know at least 100 tricks to get away from our mutual enemies. The fox said. And the last, can use first person, second person, third person point of view. For example, in the previous text, he used third person point of view, such as she and her. Finally, we have finished our discussion of narrative text. Through narrative text, we can improve aspects of our reading skills. Examples of activities are summarizing, identifying the type or genre of reading, drawing conclusions, and so on. Okay, thanks for watching. See you on the next video. Have a nice day.